Covering today. So tired landlords and why they are great listing opportunities. It's really only getting uh, better, I guess, as far not so much for the landlords in all scenarios, but with this being a steady source for listing leads, depending on how you put together this funnel, and that is what we will be doing most likely next week, is showing you from beginning to end how to find the landlord that you should be targeting, some messaging that you should be reaching out with, how to speak with them, getting them into a CRM drip system, things like that, and then using an LLM, some an AI, whatever your favorite, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, to help fine tune the messaging there. So we're going to put it all together next week. This week is just touching on the data points so you can see why these are, becoming more and more steady as a listing source, and how to speak to them really. So, and I had this little piece right here that actually just popped in my email this morning after I'd already finished my presentation, which really kind of goes along with what I'm talking about here. So, this just came out today. Fannie and Freddie are killing abbreviated condo reviews. If you have been listing condos, I'm sure, depending on the status of the condo with their balcony inspections, if you're having a hard time selling this thing or not. So, starting August 3rd, loan applications for condo projects will no longer qualify for Fannie Mae's limited review or Freddie Mac's streamlined review. Most established projects with more than 10 units will now require a full project review, adding documentation demands around budgets, reserves, insurance inspections, and special assessments that condo boards control, not the lenders. So the risk for originators is less about borrower qualification and more about whether the condo association can produce the paperwork. AD Mortgage data showed 53% of its conventional condo production in the state since 2021 used limited review. So this isn't making it easier to finance these things. Um, and we might see some more people, especially investors, getting out of condos. We might see prices come down in some projects if they are not in compliance because financing is just going to be very, very difficult on a lot of these. And that makes these hard to sell. Um, so moving on to the actual topic, that was a little side quest, I guess. Why California's tired landlords are this year's best listing opportunities. So basically 10 years of rising costs. I pulled about 10 years of data here just to give a snapshot. If we went 20 years or 15, we'd see even bigger swings, I'm sure. But it's rising costs, it's tightening regulation, and a shrinking buyer pool have quietly pushed California's small landlords to a decision point. So we're going to look at the data behind the shift, what's actually complicating an owner's ability to manage or exit a rental property today, and how the conversation with these owners needs to be different from the ones we're used to having with owner-occupant home sellers. So, there's definitely a different motivation there. So the Road to Housing Act, I think a couple weeks ago mentioned that, I think Gary mentioned that this had passed and kind of went over it a little bit. So what's part of this? Federal ban on institutional investors owning 350 or more single-family homes. That just took effect, and obviously Wall Street is already reacting to it. Investor-owned homes listed for sale have more than doubled already since February, and that was before that even passed. So this is only making it, uh, only making the situation worse as far as more investor homes coming on the market. So Progress Residential, Invitation Homes, AMH, and these others are all net sellers this year already. So these were big corporations with 3,180 more homes sold than bought since January. So they're selling off more than they're buying, these institutional investors. Smaller investors, those with 10 to 1,000 homes, still make up 70% of all landlords nationally, and they're watching the same headlines as these big players are reacting to it. What's easy to miss here is it's not about empty units. Like I said, California's landlords aren't sitting on vacant properties really unless they want to be. Um, Tenants, there's always a demand for rentals. US Nash, the national average is 7.3% vacancy rate. California is only sitting at a 4.5. So, I mean, that is great. That's a good environment for that particular piece as far as being, a landlord in California, being able to, have steady, um, you know, rent activity on your units. But the other issues mostly come with affordability and regulations, which I'm sure we all hear about from time to time, and we're going to kind of put it all together so that when, or should you start wanting to work with this type of lead, and generating these types of leads, you can have some facts and speak their language as to what is their motivation for selling, because it's probably going to be one of these things. So we are looking at a thinner buyer pool. So it's not like, they're going to be unloading their properties because, there's a whole bunch of buyers ready to buy these. That's not the issue either. Affordability, only about 18% of California households can actually afford a median price home. So um, that's not a great statistic there. Um, so that matters for how this conversation gets framed with an owner. So they aren't selling into a market flooded with easy buyers and, getting these multiple offers and everything. So the value that an agent brings isn't just let's list it. It's knowing who's actually buying right now and what that means for a seller's options. So investor-owned homes listed for sale more than doubled since early February. So this is I don't want to say it's an emerging market, but it's definitely gaining steam. So I think it's a good one to really get focused on as part of your marketing plan if you have put one together, or if you're looking to put one together or make adjustments. I would look at adding in investor-owned homes. So let's look at the past decade of rising costs. Um, we're looking at just insurance. I mean, and this would be something that is not even in the high fire zone. So we're looking at, back about 10 years ago, about 1270 a year to insure a pretty average rental. That's what I had always quoted. I always quoted people, about $100 a month. Sometimes you could do a little better than that, just depending, but it's doubled since then, just just in insurance costs without high fire area. So nationally, homeowner insurance premiums rose about 90%, so almost 100, just in the past 10 years. A lot of that has come recently, though. This was fairly steady for a little bit, and then really the past few years is when we've seen some real big increases in insurance. So California's outrunning that trend, not just tracking with it. Premiums rose 21% just in 2025 alone, and the state is projected to be the fastest rising in the country heading, uh, well, I guess out of 2026. Seven of the 12 largest carriers have pulled back from California entirely. The state's FAIR Plan, which is basically the last resort insurer, now holds upwards of 668,000 policies, which is up 146% since September of 22, with another 30%, a 36% average rate increase pending. In the highest fire risk zones, quotes are running 10,000 a year plus. Um, so that's if anybody, any of these landlords have units in high fire areas, their insurance is just skyrocketing right now, or they're getting dropped. And then they have to go with the fair plan. Property management hasn't really gone up per se. The fee percentage has remained pretty steady on what a property manager charges to manage the property. But what a lot of property management companies have kind of shifted to is add-on fees for like lease renewals, eviction coordination, and inspections. A lot of them will do twice a year inspections, and it previously itemized separately other than bundled in. So it used to be, hey, I'm going to charge you this amount of money, and we're going to do all this stuff. Now it's, hey, we're going to charge you this amount of money, and then anything extra, we're going to charge you. So those fees are getting tacked into, rising costs of ownership. Um, I checked in on skilled maintenance labor. Obviously, that has gone up quite a bit as well in the past 10 years. If you've had any work done on your home, or if you have helped a client get work done, you have seen, especially since COVID, really, the rising costs of just home repair in general. A plumbing call used to be a couple $100, and now we're looking at, $400 just for the call and about an hour's worth of work usually. So it has definitely gotten much more expensive to maintain properties as well, which obviously can affect, the quality of the home. So if they were up on maintenance quite a bit before, maybe landlords, are starting to kind of let that go by the wayside a little bit just because the costs to do repairs have gotten so expensive. Um, this one is a pretty good burden. So the rent increase limits from no statewide limit 10 years ago to a hard cap now. So in 2016, there was no statewide cap. Um, you can raise the rent amount as you saw fit, essentially. January 2020, AB 1482, which was the Tenant Protection Act, capped at 5% plus CPI of a 10% and 10% max. 2026, current caps, some of the cities, larger metros do have different caps. You're looking at San Francisco is 6.3, LA 8.7. Um, so this can hurt landlords who were not really keeping up. And I have heard this quite a bit. And the reason why, one of the reasons why I thought this was a good webinar is because I have been seeing more of the rental units come on the market that we're listing or potentially on the other side of, but it's more that we're listing them. Um, and we're seeing some landlords who have owned the units for a long time, 20, maybe 30 years. And, they had a good tenant in there for the past 12 years. They didn't raise rent on them. And so now they've got this unit with really low rent. It's not even close to market rate. And they can't just all of a sudden raise it up to where it needs to be. That's, because of the rent cap. So that's causing them to want to get out of the house, oftentimes. So, that was that one. And then eviction timelines, eviction process. So the response window alone already doubled. That doubled in 2025. So a just cause requirement also added statewide in 2020. So before they had 5 days to respond. We're talking about the tenants. Now they have up to 10 business days to respond. Um, so this law, effective last year, doubled the tenant's response window on eviction filing from 5 business days to, oh, it's 10 court days. Sorry, I had those flip-flopped. In practice, total time from notice to lockout now runs 30 to 90 days. I think you'd be pretty lucky with that. And court backlogs in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Alameda counties, they can stretch the trial setting portion out to 45 to 70 days on a contested case, which is well past the 20-day target. So, I mean, I've heard many landlords just they're stuck with their tenant. They can't get them out. They haven't been paying rent for several months. So this is another reason why, landlords are getting kind of spooked about, continuing to rent their property here and what's the liability on it from them. So the just cause, the complication nobody explains well. So eviction timelines are one problem. Just cause is a bigger one. So the just cause evictions, because it governs whether a landlord can remove a tenant at all, but not just how long it takes. So once a tenant has lived in a unit For 12 continuous months, state law requires a legally qualifying reason to end that tenancy. A lease simply expiring does not count as one. So at fault reasons, so that's going to be non-payment, a lease violation, nuisance, criminal activity. Those require no relocation payment, but the reason has to be specific and stated clearly in the notice. Vague or generic notices get challenged and often thrown out. And I do have, you from our team asked me, about getting tenants out and things like that. And those of you that have asked me, you probably got the answer to hire an eviction attorney or hire an eviction service. It's really not something that we should be trying to figure out or perform if that is not within our usual scope of duty. I would much rather the homeowner pay, it's not even that much of a fee, especially for the eviction services, to have it done right and put that liability onto that service to get that tenant out. No fault reasons. So that's going to be owner or family move-in, intent to substantially remodel or demolish, withdrawing the unit from the rental market, complying with a government order. Requires a 60-day notice and a relocation payment equal to 1 month's rent, paid before the tenant vacates or within 15 days of the notice. So what is a substantial remodel? It has to, it has a real bar to be clear. Permitted major construction work. So cosmetic upgrades don't qualify, so a light refresh can't be used as a pretext to clear a tenant for a sale. I mean, we're talking substantial, you can't live here type remodel. Owner move-in comes with its own condition. The owner or qualifying family member has to actually move in within 90 days and stay for at least a year, something a tenant or a court can scrutinize after the fact. So getting this process wrong carries real financial exposure. Court's going to award the tenant attorney's fees, actual damages, up to 3 times damages for willful violation. Um, there are countless tenant right groups out there, nonprofits, things like that, and they just absolutely love to come after small landlords and create a scene and get a case going against them, especially in a multi-unit property. So we want to make sure that we are handling evictions prior to listing very carefully. And like I said, I always recommend just getting the eviction service in place or an eviction attorney to handle it so that we can be assured that it is done correctly. The trap most homeowners don't see. Individually owned single-family homes are usually exempt from just cause entirely. The exception most commonly misunderstood, holding that same property in an LLC generally erases the exemption, even though the owner is, in very practical case, an individual. A lot of small landlords set up an LLC years ago purely for liability protection with no idea that it put them into a more restrictive eviction rules that come with it. That single fact is often the most useful thing an agent can bring to a first conversation. I mean, it's pretty easy to find non-owner occupant homes with, that are deeded into an LLC. So, I mean, that's just one way that you can find some of these properties. Um, what do we have here? So, with the new rules piling up, before I get into this, let me check chat real quick. Yes, these are always recorded. We'll put them in the back office. The rest of them are Gary. So the new rules piling up. So just cause and the eviction timeline aren't the only obligations that have changed recently. 2 more are worth knowing as well, which is security deposit protection, cut roughly in half. I do not love this one. So before AB 12, you could do 2 months unfurnished. So if the unit was unfurnished, you could charge up to 2 months rent for the security deposit. After AB 12, which was July of 2024, they only do 1 month now. So that's less protection for the landlord. should there be damages and or early termination of the lease, maybe they leave a month early or something like that and leave the unit damaged, that puts them in a worse position. Security deposits were capped at a 1 month's rent mid 2024, down from from up to 2 months in an unfurnished unit or three for furnished. So move out documentation, and this is for those of you doing leasing. I want to reiterate, if you are doing the walkthrough on behalf of the landlord as the leasing agent, you must take pictures of the unit. That is not just a courtesy or risk reduction. That is a law. It has to be done. So be sure you're doing that, please. Move out documentation. Since last year, owners must photograph the property at both move in and move out. The real trap, if an owner conducts a pre-move out inspection and doesn't flag a specific piece of damage on the itemized list at the time, they generally can't charge for it later, even if the damage is real and tenant caused, unless it occurred after that inspection or was concealed by furniture. Good faith walkthrough that misses, one thing now carries real financial consequence. So be sure you are taking photos of the unit during the walkthrough and the move out if you are leasing. For major statewide landlord obligations in 5 years. So in 2020, we had the just cause and rent cap come around. 2024, deposit caps cut to 1 month. 2025, we had move out photo documentation. And again, in 2025, eviction response window doubled. So it's just, as you can see, becoming harder and harder for the landlords to protect themselves and to effectively rent these properties out. Um, so why this is an opportunity, not just data. So again, we'll go into building this whole thing out next week. But landlords, they know their insurance renewal hurt. They've heard the rent cap. Very few of them have sat down and added all of it together into one honest answer to the question of whether the property is still worth the hassle or not. And when you start touching on these pain points, they really start adding this up in their head, especially if they've been kind of on the fence, like, I don't know if I'm going to keep renting this thing or not. You start touching on these points and really getting them thinking about how much, not only how much more they're spending now, but the added liability they have just from continuing to rent this thing. So if it's been kind of stagnant on appreciation, if they aren't making, if it doesn't cash flow all that well right now, these are all great points to, you know, touch with when you are communicating with these homeowners. That gap between knowing scattered pieces and seeing the whole picture at once is the actual opportunity. The motivation isn't being, we're not manufacturing this here. This is all real stuff that's happening and why landlords are taking their money and running essentially, or they're getting into simpler rentals. Maybe they're looking at a state, maybe they're doing REITs and other things like that where they're not actually managing property. Um, so for every agent working this market has access to the same MLS. Very few of them are having this specific conversation because having it requires knowing the numbers that we just walked through, not simply recognizing a for rent sign and guessing. So that's a real edge. That's the kind of stuff that's going to help you convert that lead if you're looking at for rent by owners and things like that, to source these leads. And there's a lot of ways to do it, but touching on these real pain points will probably get you further down the uh, the channel with that lead as far as the conversation goes, because just like you're getting, the wholesalers are calling them saying, hey, have you ever thought about selling? And that's we all get those calls. So we need to come in at a different angle with um, these types of homeowners. Let's see. So when we're talking about the conversation, um, when you're dealing with the owner occupant conversation, it's about a home. There's memory in it, next chapter of someone's life to plan for, a real emotional cost to leaving that has to be respected. None of that applies to an owner who has never lived in a property. There's no nostalgia keeping them there. There's no emotional loss, which means the conversation shouldn't be open with, hey, curb appeal and things like that, and how the light comes through the kitchen. It's about numbers with investors. So, the insurance, the property management fees, the maintenance costs, are they having a problem with just cause evictions, things like that, or even the ability to raise rent. That's all hurting them. An owner occupant usually already knows they want to move for some life reason and is working out the mechanics of it. A landlord usually hasn't decided anything yet because most of them haven't run their own numbers recently. They bought 8, 10, 15 years ago and are still carrying assumptions from back then. The first job with this audience isn't convincing them to sell, it's showing them what actually happened to their numbers since they stopped paying close attention, which is exactly what we're covering here. Um, so the opening line should never be, have you thought about selling? That, like I said, that's what the wholesalers are coming in with. We don't want that conversation. You're just going to be perceived as another wholesaler. A stronger opening is specific and true. Insurance in their zip code is probably running close to double what it was 3 years ago. Have they seen their renewal yet? That's a fundamentally different first impression than just, hey, you want to sell your house. Um, there's also a tenant sitting in the middle of every one of these conversations, something an owner-occupant conversation never has. So timeline, property condition, even whether an owner can sell easily at all, that is a common fear with a lot of these landlords is, hey, I want to sell, but I can't get this tenant out, or I don't want to disturb the tenant because I need their rent in order to cover the mortgage on this house. I can't even go 1 month without it. So we need to make sure that we're having the correct conversation. Um, Landlords also think about price differently. Typically, they don't care as much about getting top dollar for their house the way an owner occupant would, but they care a great deal about the number after taxes and after expenses and about whether an off-market sale, a cash buyer, 1031 exchange nets more than a traditional listing would. So the decision itself tends to be slower and more distributed too. There's often more than one name on a title. It's going to be a trust, a partnership, an out-of-state owner, the co-owner. Uh, Sometimes it's between family. There's usually multiple owners. At the end of the conversation with the landlord, usually isn't, let's list it. It's send me what you're seeing on my specific numbers. You know, that's what we want to get to is get them interested in what do these numbers look like if I were to sell today? Why does that make sense to me? So there are a ton of small landlords out there. It's not just all institutions owning these homes. Um, according to the data, uh, you're looking at 1.23 million homes owned by small landlords. The mom and pops out there, not institutional. Um, California has roughly 1.45 million investor-owned homes, second only to Texas nationally. About 85% of that, roughly 1.23 million homes, is small landlords with 1 to 5 properties, not the institutions. So that's the pool this entire strategy is built around. It's concentrated where you'd expect, obviously, Los Angeles, San Diego. They run 15 to 16% investor owned with a handful of smaller and tourist-heavy counties running far higher. Uh, so it's an identifiable market. There's plenty there, and as you can see, they have 1 to 5 homes that they own. So that's the other benefit of working with investor clients is if you do well on the unit they want to get rid of, there's a high probability they have a couple more behind that they may also want to um, find a way out of essentially. So where do company tools come in? So yes, everybody knows we have Lofty here. There is some really cool stuff in there I want to show you next week. especially the homeowner AI, because that's going to take care of a lot of nurturing for you. We also have RedX, and we have available seats with RedX for a much smaller fee than what you would just pay RedX if you were to just go to them solo. And then, an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT or something like that, using that for some other purposes. But basically, you could take those three things right there and create yourself a great funnel that really is not going to cost much. You're not paying for leads. You're paying for data, and it's going to be a nominal amount. Because RedX is going to have you can find these tired landlords in the areas you want to work. You can pull out the contact information. You can get all that stuff from RedX, and then get them into Lofty and get them into some of the AI stuff that Lofty has to help you with nurturing, and then using, an AI, and you don't even have to use that stuff necessarily, but that could help with building out some really good campaign material that works. So let me check the chat super quick. Um, Yeah, what is the best approach to an owner with a tenant occupied property and our buyer wants to preview the property? A lot of times that is going to be a subject to showing. So essentially, you kind of have to get an offer in first, subject to interior viewing of the home. It's typically how it's done because then the owner can properly set up a 24-hour notice if the tenant's being difficult with showings, and then, the buyer goes in, if everything looks good, then you just continue with the offer. Well, getting escrow open and everything. And if it doesn't look good, then they just cancel it. So there's no escrow open typically or anything with those. There's lots of ways you can do it. Um, the Redx info for the reduced price is going to be in the biz sale, in the business packages we have in the back office. We're putting that all together this week so that we can, kind of show you how this could all work in a flow if you're looking to pick up listing leads, which usually people, uh, you know, 9.5 times out of 10, when you say, hey, I want to get some leads, you're asking me for, hey, I want to get listings. So this is one way that you could do it without paying, you know, any of the third-party companies out there that's selling leads to you. Are those bad? Not necessarily, but the quality isn't going up, I'll tell you that. So you can do it yourself without paying for the leads. You're just paying for the platforms and then putting the contacts in there. So that's what makes this much more cost effective. And like I said, you instead of just going after one homeowner at a time, when you're going after one investor who wants to unload their portfolio of 1, 5, 10 properties, well, that makes for a pretty good year. So just for sake of time, we're going to add this PDF right here to the recording in the office. So if you want to skim through this, you can. I did put together a list of locating absentee owners, which could also be tired landlords, more than likely. These are people who are not living in the home. So they were either renting it or maybe it was a second home or something. But obviously, county tax assessor's office you can go to, you know, um, real estate data providers such as RedX and things like that. You can get those to find these people. Probate notices, I gave some links in here if you want to search through there. Notices of abatement and condemned properties. Sometimes that's just driving around a neighborhood and saying that house is definitely empty right there, and reaching out to the homeowner and asking, hey, do you want to sell this thing? It appears to be a burden. So, and then delinquent property taxes, that can be sourced in Redx 2, I believe. You can find people who are behind in taxes, and clearly that home is a burden for them. So reaching out to them to see, if it is that burden, are they wanting to see what their numbers look like, so that they can get this thing off their books, hopefully, and you can help them do that. And then for rent advertisements, I mean, you can go anywhere online and see homes for rent. Um, Maybe they're just renting because that's what they've been doing, but they would rather not, but they need that monthly payment. So, or maybe they don't feel like it's quite sellable in the current condition, but you can see, from online what is for rent. You know they're an investor. Get them into your database, start nurturing and talking to them. Um, the other benefit of that is you can figure out what the rent cycles are, which is a lot of people don't think about, I think. So if it's for rent today and it gets rented, let's just say August 1st or something like that, you can bet that that's probably going to be a 12-month lease. I mean, it might be a 6 month, and you can touch base with that homeowner in 6 months to see how the rental's going to, kind of poke at them because timing is also an important thing. It's the time that you're also reaching out to them. Is it, if they're in the middle of their lease and, you're talking to them about selling their property and things like that, they're probably not going to be super receptive. So finding what their rent cycles are, um, and you could do that through some pretty simple, MLS searches. That's a big, uh, I think that's a great thing to add into your marketing, and your workflow is finding the cycles, so that you're hitting them at the right times. You're having those conversations at the right times when that unit is about to become vacant, or possibly renewed, and maybe they don't want to renew. So you're going to want to reach out about a month or two early to see if that's what they intend to do. So, um, other than that, just informational today. Like I said, we are putting together something, probably next week, should have it done. We can put all this together. We're going to get a workflow for you, if you're interested in that. And that way there you're not out there buying bad leads. You're putting together your own databases that make sense, and you're, providing value, and you're going to be reaching out with, better communication than just kind of what's standard in a CRM. Got a few questions here. Do. I saw that. Um, is the same deal we spoke about last month, 75. Red X is 75. We could probably do that, separately, or we're going to bundle it in with, the Lofty platform because, and the reason why is because I want to show some things that are in Lofty that help with this thing, especially with the homeowner AI stuff. All right. Can we provide purchasing financing for mobile manufactured home yet? Um, well, manufactured, yes. They still have not set up our account yet for mobile homes. Yes, we do have mobile home financing coming soon. I'm waiting for them. They have been very, very slow to, get us set up, but, we'll check in with them this week and see. We've sent them all of our, everything they need to get us set up with our account so we can start, helping you out with mobile home financing too. So that'd be mobile home on leased land in a park, not your typical converted manufactured home. So, and I'll make that announcement once we, finally get that finalized. So, anyways, I hope you found it informative. This PDF available so that, if you want to run through any of these, maybe you don't want to do any Red X or Lofty or anything like that, and you prefer to grind it out online and through searches, then, there's definitely some ways you can do that here. So, and this will be in the recording in the back office, riserealtyoffice.com, and you're going to click on the training and motivation tab, and you will see all of our previously recorded webinars along with the presentation material, which is going to be this PDF right here. So, in case you want to go through it. Other than that, hopefully you have a great week, and if you need anything, give me a call. We'll talk to you soon.